It is episode 153 of Decoding Fox News, and I'm your host, Juliet Jeske. Each week, I watch and analyze a whole heck of a lot of Fox News and then break it down. I watch all the Fox News you'd never want to. Let's get into it. Here's the headline. As Trump implodes, Fox disses Democrats.
And I think if they get out of the way, the tariff issue is going to be rocky, and it's going to take some. I think the president has an opportunity tonight to talk about maybe some short-term pain and explain it to the American people.
It is part of a bigger plan, a longer-term plan, and there's short-term pain in it. But I would tell you, this is why we don't want to wait for one big, beautiful bill.
The stock market dropped 1,200 points in 2 days.
You've got to figure out how you grow this economy for everyone. The stock market's taken a little bit of a hit the last 2 days, but that's the richest of the country that really looks to that.
But a quick thought on this issue of tariffs, which we brought up before, because this is a rocky issue.
Dear American people, this is what I want to do, and this is why. And it might be rocky for a while, but hang with me. Be patient. Follow me. I want to persuade you to go with me all the way to this end point that I see.
There will be some belt tightening on the tariffs. I don't think it's going to be that bad, and it needs to be explained.
The tariffs will go on agricultural product coming into America, and our farmers starting on April 2nd. It may be a little bit of an adjustment period. We had that before when I made the deal with China. Fifths remind us that tariffs are not just about protecting American jobs. They're about protecting the soul of our country. Tariffs are about making America rich again and making America great again, and it's happening, and it will happen rather quickly. There'll be a little disturbance, but we're okay with that.
There were multiple times where he talked about tariffs, and that's obviously a rocky road if you look at the markets over the last couple of days and people talking about it. In that, he said there will be a little disturbance, but we're okay with that.
He touched on tariffs. He admitted that there's going to be some pain points. I think he understands that you can't get America back if you don't put pressure on manufacturing.
So the last clip in that montage, that last voice that you heard, was Tiffany Smiley, and she is a Republican who ran for Congress in Washington State. She did not win. She's been added as a contributor to the PBS NewsHour this year for the Trump term. She is hardcore MAGA, and it's been interesting to see her interact with some of the other panelists on when they've discussed like the inauguration, and that past clip was from the night of Trump's speech to a joint session of Congress, which is also basically a fancier name because of the status of his term for the State of the Union address. If he was president for a year, it would be called the State of the Union address. So anyway, moving on. Very interesting. We'll get into that whole tariffs cause pain in a moment. So as the stock market tumbled and Trump's approval ratings continue to drop, the folks at Fox cherry-picked biased polls, misled their viewers about tariffs, repeated the president's lies about immigration, and demonized Democrats. Although members of the minority party did not bring noisemakers and egg cartons to the president's joint speech to Congress as predicted by the folks at Fox News, they were still criticized at length for not standing or applauding Trump's invited guest. During his speech, Trump chose to honor the family members of victims of crimes committed by undocumented immigrants, anti-transgender advocates, a pediatric cancer patient, a victim of cyberbullying, the relatives of Corey Compatore, the man who was murdered during an attempted assassination of the president, and Mark Fogel, an American who until recently was held prisoner in Russia. Fox News hosts repeatedly expressed outrage and indignation that Democratic lawmakers did not stand and applaud as Trump told the stories of his various guests. The Democrats' choice to sit silently during most of Trump's speech was portrayed as an insult to every American. There was no mention of Trump's many exaggeration and lies during his address, including false statements about the Social Security Administration sending checks to long-deceased Americans. Multiple Fox News hosts also rewrote history as they claimed that President Donald J. Trump had always warned that tariffs issued on imports from our largest trading partners would cause, quote, temporary pain. He did not. And again, I watched 88 hours of him last year. He did not say that once. While he was campaigning for president, Trump promised prosperity, the end of foreign wars, and lower prices on day one of his presidency. So far, the American people have gotten a weakened NATO, higher prices, financial markets in turmoil, and massive layoffs in the federal government. The world has also seen draconian cuts in needed foreign aid, trade wars looming on the horizon, and an empowered Russia. Anyone watching Fox News exclusively last week might have missed out on stories about Trump's falling approval ratings, political unrest in Serbia, and a plan by wealthy Arab countries that would weaken Hamas and rebuild the Gaza Strip. Shows I watched on Fox News last week were Fox and Friends, The Five, The Ingram Angle, Special Report with Bret Baier on Tuesday, Jesse Watters Primetime on Tuesday, Hannity on Monday and Tuesday, and the Fox News special coverage of the joint speech to Congress. And that ended up being 19 hours. Yikes! Again, I want to get into this whole idea of tariffs being temporary pain or an adjustment period. As somebody, again, who watched 88 hours of full-length rallies, going through them sometimes 2 or 3 times, watching interviews, town halls, press conferences, you name it, phone calls to Fox and Friends, all of this is included in those 88 hours. I can assure you, because I know a lot of people can't sit through his long-winded nonsense. I can assure you, he never once said, oh, by the way, we're going to have some temporary pain, or there's going to be an adjustment here, this is going to be difficult. Never once. He just said tariffs, we're going to, destroy, everybody treats us so unfairly, and these tariffs are going to make everything wonderful. That's basically how he presented it, as if the tariffs were this brilliant plan that nobody had ever thought of until him, and he was going to revolutionize everything with his brilliant tariff plan and settle the score with the rest of the world. So next up, we have Al Green, the ultimate Democrat demon. The folks at Fox News had their latest villain, a 78-year-old cane-wielding black congressman who has represented the 9th District of Texas since 2005. Representative Al Green interrupted President Trump during his speech to a joint session of Congress. After his outburst, Speaker Mike Johnson ordered the sergeant-at-arms to remove Green from the House chamber. Every Fox News employee seemingly completely forgot that both Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene and Representative Lauren Boebert aggressively heckled President Joe Biden during more than one of his State of the Union speeches. Representative Joe Wilson of South Carolina also screamed, "You lie!" very, very loudly, actually, during President Barack Obama's joint session of Congress in 2009. None of the Republican disruptors were removed after their outburst. No one on Fox News seemed to know much about Green, as their insults amounted to petty remarks about his appearance more than anything else. So this gets pathetic. They kept talking about Al Green, but they didn't really say anything about him. So the first comment is from the day after Trump's speech to a joint session of Congress. This is Greg Gutfeld from The Five.
Al Green was the perfect hood ornament for this. He's a party with no room left except ugliness. And he is, you couldn't find a better bad guy if you scoured all the Quentin Tarantino movies. He looks the part. He's a seething boil of a man.
The Al Green is a congressman from the same district where DJ, the 13-year-old cancer victim, is from. Grace would have been being a little more tolerant of that whole speech. And I think it's an insult that that little boy's congressman walked out of that speech.
So again, just to clarify, Green did not walk out of the speech. He was removed from the House chamber by the sergeant-in-arms, which that's never happened before. So this is from the following night from the Ingram angle. This is Laura Ingram. She gives him a nickname, which didn't really stick because I didn't hear anybody else calling him this. Here we go.
Hence Al Green's new nickname, the Raging Cane. You don't do what Al the Raging Cane Green did. They celebrated him.
And this last comment is from Judge Jeanine Pirro from Friday on The Five.
And Frank Luntz is warning that the left is going to be worse off if they side with cane-shaking losers like Al Green.
So that was interesting. Those were sort of the best clips I could pull about Al Green. He kept coming up, but I kept going, well, what are you really saying about him? Nothing. Greg Gutfeld had the worst insult by calling him a hood ornament. Gutfeld has used that insult before towards other people, especially Democrats. And it is interesting that they're talking about Democrats so much. I mean, do they really think the average American is getting upset watching that speech that was basically a campaign speech by Donald J. Trump? Oh, look, the Democrats aren't standing up. The people who would get upset about that already hate the Democrats. Your typical independent voter probably didn't even watch that speech. They may have. And if they did, would they have cared? I don't know. It was an hour and 40 minutes long. They probably turned it off. I found this speech incredibly boring because he kept kind of repeating himself. It was a bunch of lies. There are huge sections that he didn't really talk about, like healthcare. What's happening with healthcare? I have no idea. Is he going to take the ACA away or Obamacare? I don't know. Are we going to have health insurance anymore? I don't know, because I'm one of those people who's on the ACA. So there's a lot of things that were just, I don't get it. To spend as much time as they did complaining about Democrats, again, the opposing party, not standing up and cheering during a speech was a bit crazy, because I don't think your typical American cares. I'd also add that Trump's speech itself sort of blunted the stories that were very compelling of his various guests, because the overall tone of his speech was just filled with meanness and hateful rhetoric and lies, just blatant lies about any number of things. And, these people do have compelling and incredibly sad stories, but it just was an odd juxtaposition. That's what I would say to it. Now, Trump is in trouble this early into his presidency when Fox News is already going full on, like unfettered, anti-Democrat. Now, normally this would be Biden's horrible. And now because they don't have Biden, although they're still talking about him, and they even managed to whip out a Hunter Biden story, which I'm not including because why? Nobody cares. And it's a very unsurprising story about Hunter Biden. It's like, Hunter Biden's broke. Nobody wants to buy his art. Okay, yeah, duh. Moving on. Nobody cares. Your average American doesn't care about Hunter Biden. They never cared. But anyway, so this is a collection of comments. Odin is on the desk, everybody. Odin is on the desk. I feel like I have to announce that Odin is one of my cats. I have two, Odin and Thor, because when he does that, it makes noise on the microphone. But this is a collection of quotes about evil Democrats. This starts with the day after the speech. This first one is Laura Ingraham. Here we go.
Trump's just driven the left stark raving mad. Well, but the truth is, as we've said for many years, this Democratic Party has next to nothing in common with the party of JFK or even Bill Clinton. It's morphed into an amalgam of fringe ideologues and radical anti-American maniacs. And most of them truly loathe this country, which is why they insist that America is systemically racist and why they treat criminals like George Floyd like folk heroes and drag queens like cultural icons.
So that's hardly subtle to use words like anti-American maniacs. Most of them truly loathe this country. This is why they insist that America is systemically racist and why they treat criminals like George Floyd like folk heroes and drag queens like cultural icons. And she also calls them stark raving mad. Okay, why? Because they didn't clap at a speech? Are you kidding me? At a speech that is by its design political theater? That they didn't clap at a speech, so you're going all the way to this complete absurdity. Okay. Now, next up, this is from earlier that day. This is Dana Perino. This is a quick comment, but I found this very telling.
And we have led this show for 2 days now after the speech about how terrible the Democrats are. That's a pretty remarkable thing when President Trump makes news every other minute.
So I think that statement says it all, because in this case, was Fox reporting the news or was Fox creating news? And I would say this is a great example of Fox creating news. The stock market is crashing. It crashed last week. Bad news for the stock market, multiple days. Things were happening in Europe that were very alarming to a lot of people as Trump cut off intelligence and cut off aid to Ukraine. People were dying. And this is what they were reporting on. They're talking about how Democrats acted at a speech that is known for being political theater. Like, you are creating news. Nobody cares. They were doing back-to-back segments that were basically trashing Democrats. We're going to go back to Laura Ingraham. This is the next day after that.
The Democrats have the same problem they've had for a long time. They fundamentally loathe the American tradition. Didn't used to be that way. The Democrats seem like a sad circus, sad clowns, where the performers just sulk as the tent collapses around them.
And next up, we have Doug Schoen. He is a frequent guest on Laura Ingraham specifically, but he's on Fox often, but he's especially on her show specifically. They all have sort of their favorite guests, and Laura Ingraham turns to Schoen quite a bit. Doug Schoen. There's two men with the last name Schoen, but they're not related. Doug Schoen is a Democratic strategist. I don't know how much of a Democrat he is anymore because he tends to just rip on the Democratic Party every time he's on air. But here's his comment. This is from the same show.
I disagree with the Republicans on a lot of things. They go further than I would go. So I cling to my membership in the Democratic Party, but it's not the same party. It isn't, CJ said, the party of John F. Kennedy or Bill Clinton.
So again, I'm not sure how much of an actual Democrat he is. We're going to go back to Laura Ingraham. And this is just, again, there's no subtlety here. It's just like a sledgehammer just banging this point home.
Corruption, fraud, abuse of power. Well, Doge, of course, is exposing all of this, but it's got one obstacle, sort of mini obstacle, the Democrat Party.
So this dichotomy, it's very funny. Aaron Rupar posted something that was very, very funny yesterday, where he said something about how the doddering old fool of Joe Biden was also a mastermind. And she sort of just did that, where she said, you know, they have this obstacle, this tiny obstacle, the Democratic Party, after she just basically called them like evil masterminds. That's what they do. Does any of this make sense? It's kind of, again, kind of like Hunter Biden. Why are we even talking about him? I didn't include the clip because I'm like, nope. There's no reason. I'll just mention it. We don't need to go back to that nonsense. If you think things were going well for Trump, wouldn't they just be like, Trump is like they were trying to do about Doge for a few weeks there, and now they've kind of dropped that a little bit. Now this next clip is from Bret Baier. This is subtle. This takes a minute to build. This is from Tuesday, special report with Bret Baier. This is from the night of the speech, and I caught this and went, what did they just say? And this is Kelly Sabreri. She was reporting from Chicago. She's a Fox News correspondent. She's new to me. And this is a short clip about the FAA and air traffic controllers. Here we go.
FAA is short 3,600 air traffic controllers. The agency now in a surge hiring period until March 17th. There is a high turnover rate in this profession, thanks in part to a mandatory retirement age of 55. Applicants must be younger than 31 years old before that closing date of the application period to apply. The process to hire will now be 4 months shorter than typical. Plus, the FAA plans to incentivize the job by raising Academy hourly pay by 30%. Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy says companies like SpaceX are helping modernize their infrastructure and that their agency is up against the clock.
We have to move at the speed of business, not at the speed of government. And they're helping us think through the procurement process, the time process. We're not there right now, but we can get there if we have the help from the private sector and the Congress gives us the money.
So for some clarification, that section at the end where we hear from Sean Duffy, the Secretary of Transportation, former Fox News host, former MTV reality star. No kidding. He is also a congressman, briefly. That was heavily edited. So almost every phrase was cut. And I'm not sure where that was from. It was from America's Report, but they didn't include a date. And for me to find that exact clip might have taken forever. And I thought, well, who cares? We've got this clip. I'm going to use this context. What are they talking about? And underneath the chyron, as Sean Duffy was speaking, it said SpaceX upgrade, could possibly upgrade this, air traffic controller system. I thought it sounded a lot like they were just saying, demanding from Congress, you need to give SpaceX a bunch of money to upgrade the air traffic controller system, given the context of the full clip. Because the Fox News correspondent mentioned SpaceX when she was talking about upgrades. And none of this makes sense because, according to some research I did based on comments people were giving me on social media, I was like, what are you talking about, Verizon? I'm looking this up because PBS didn't mention this at all. So Verizon already has a 15-year, $2.4 billion contract with the FAA to modernize the air traffic controller system. Now, according to reporting by Yahoo Finance, and this is from yesterday, Musk's SpaceX said its Starlink satellite unit has no intent to take over any FAA telecommunications contract, rejecting media reports. Reuters has reported the FAA is reviewing the Verizon contract. It's unclear why Fox News or Sean Duffy would imply that SpaceX was part of any effort to upgrade the air traffic controller system. Now, in his actual clips, they don't say SpaceX. Sean Duffy did not actually say SpaceX, but it was on the Cryon, and the Fox News correspondent mentioned SpaceX. So it was just very bizarre. I'm like, I don't know what's going on there. If it's some sort of way to sort of subtly say, hey, by the way, SpaceX is going to take over this contract. It did say in the Yahoo Finance article that Sean Duffy was frustrated with the speed of Verizon. Well, I don't know enough. It didn't really elaborate any specifics, but I would think that something like this should not be sped through. If they thought it was going to take 15 years, maybe give them 15 years. I don't think air traffic control should be something that should be upgraded willy-nilly without somebody seriously going through this and figuring this out. At this point in the podcast, I should give a shout out to my sponsor before we move on to the next clip. And that sponsor is the listeners of this podcast and the readers of my newsletter on Substack. That is right. I'm 100% crowdsource funded. That is, I have no sponsor. I have no grant. I have no billionaire writing me a check. I don't work with a larger organization that somehow gives me money. I don't have wealthy parents. I have none of that. It's hundreds of people basically pledging their support through subscriptions on Substacks and subscriptions on Patreon. If you'd like to become a financial supporter of Decoding Fox News, you go to my Substack at Decoding Fox News. It's $5 a month for a subscription, going all the way up to $165 for a founding member, and that's for the year, or $55 for the year. So it's like 3 levels, $5, $55, or $165. Then there's over at Patreon, I have multiple levels, and everybody gets the same thing because I'm massively overworked. And it's kind of like socialist Patreon. If you want to support the project, it's a great way to support it as well. Another great way is to share the podcast, share the newsletter, tell your friends. And again, Odin and Thor, my mascots, they're both cats, send their love. I want to say very quickly that after I get done recording this, I'm going to check what the CPI report is, which is about to come out in about 5 minutes. I'm giving it away when I'm recording this. And then today I share a birthday with Liza Minnelli, which is March 12th. I won't say the year, but born in the 70s, Gen X. And I'm going to go see some art today in Manhattan because that's what I like to do when I have time off. And it's going to be exciting. I might get a bagel. It's going to be exciting. So yes, me and Liza are both turning another year, celebrating another year around the sun, or however you want to put that. It's old or dead. So I just say, bring it, old. Let's do this. Anyway, moving on, we're going to go on to the next clip, which is Katie Pavlich. Wow, this one is driving me crazy because Harold Lutnick, who is the Secretary of Commerce, talked about this at length during his crazed speech during Trump's, the Madison Square Garden speech, which was bizarro on so many levels. And Lutnick seems to be very passionate about this and the Gilded Age, which I want to do an entire episode just based on tariffs because there's so much to unpack here. So this was also Tuesday night. Katie Pavlich, she was a guest on Jesse Watters Primetime, and she kind of threw this away about Trump's real plans for tariffs. And I remembered an old segment from PBS from February, which I cut up, and I'm going to play parts of that after her quote. So here we go, Katie Pavlich.
thing that has been under discussed with this whole tariff argument and debate is that President Trump's vision for tariffs is to eventually remove the income tax from America and replace the way that we pay for the federal government with tariffs. That's a deep principled belief that he has.
Now, when she said that, I remembered again this old clip, and I thought it would go perfectly, so I hunted it down. This is from early February, PBS. Paul Salmon did a extended segment. It was very informative, much longer than the clip you're going to hear, about tariffs. This first expert you're going to hear besides Salmon is a man named Douglas Irwin. He's a professor of economics from Dartmouth College. Here we go.
President Trump insists tariffs were once the great revenue source for the United States, and it's true.
Right up till the Civil War, tariffs raised 90% of the revenue for the federal government. But the federal government was very small. Spending was like 2 to 3% of GDP. So there wasn't much to fund except for the debt and the current expenditures, and the tariff did it.
Today, government spending is almost a quarter of GDP. How much do tariffs bring in?
Today, it's only about 2% of federal revenue comes from the tariff. It's just been swamped by corporate taxes, income taxes, Social Security taxes, and things of that sort.
Now Salmon is going to introduce another expert. Her name is Kimberly Clausing. She's of the UCLA School of Law, and she's the former Deputy Assistant Secretary for Tax Analysis in the U.S. Department of the Treasury during the Biden administration.
But the point is to replace those taxes. So how much more money can higher tariffs raise?
If you look at total federal revenues in a typical year, they're over $4 trillion. Almost $3 trillion of that is a combination of the individual income tax and the corporate income tax. Whereas we think the maximum you could get out of tariffs, if you really push them to the highest level you could go, would be in the neighborhood of $800 billion, right? So that's not going to come anywhere near what you need to even replace the individual income tax, let alone the corporate tax, payroll taxes, and other types of tax on income.
Now, this makes sense, and I included a graph that PBS included on the screen that sort of shows what she's talking about in terms of tax revenue versus tariff revenue, and how there's no real way what we get from tariffs is going to ever replace the tax revenues. You're just not close. And what I found in my research was anywhere from 43% to 47% comes from tax revenue, and that again, that changes year to year. That's from income taxes, and about 2% from tariffs. And this makes sense because we know how much we trade right now, and that if we tariff everything, if we push it to its limit, as she said, that's going to be a set amount that we can kind of guess at. But the more we do this, the more reciprocal tariffs we're going to face from other countries, as they're going to fight back against our tariffs, and that will probably dampen trade across the board. It would dampen imports and exports. So the damage that would be done to the economy, too, would also be difficult to measure at this point. But that's fairly obvious as we start hurting trade and increasing prices, what that's going to do to the economy as a whole. Now, according to the nonpartisan Nonprofit Tax Foundation, tariffs are a regressive tax that would harm the lowest income Americans the most. So tariffs directly increase the cost of domestic sales by artificially increasing the price on imports. The distributional effects, the economic burden it places on households across all income levels, tend to be regressive, burdening lower income households more than higher income households. Analysis of imposed and threatened U.S. tariffs as of 2018 shows that lower and middle income households experience relatively larger drops in after-tax income. And this makes sense because if you're making $30,000 a year, and the same thing goes for increasing sales tax, which some people have proposed, saying, oh, we get rid of income tax and we just hike up sales tax. It's also regressive. Because your typical person making like $30,000 a year, which in most states in the United States would be very little money, if you only earn $30,000 a year, you're probably going to spend every dime you make because you have to. You're going to spend it on rent, you're going to spend it on your car, you're going to spend it on food. And so everything you cost, if the price of that goes up, you're going to be paying more for it. You're going to be paying more for every single thing that you spend. So you're going to be spending more of a percentage on these tariffs. If you're a person who makes $300,000 per year, you're probably going to have a chunk of that income that you set aside, that you save, that you invest. And you're not going to be paying tariffs on that. You're only going to be paying tariffs on what you're consuming. So a person making a lot more in income is not going to be spending as proportionally as much of their income on tariffs or taxes. So that's how that works. If the tariff is, since the tariff is on consumer goods, it's not based on income. The more you buy, the more percentage of your income that you buy in order to survive, in the case of the poor person, the more you're going to pay. A person making a lot of excess income that can save it, that can invest it, that can put it towards things that aren't consumer goods, are going to be proportionally paying less. It's the same with the sales tax. It's the same with the tariffs. So I hope I explained that as best I could. But yes, it's very much a regressive tax, because also I want to say this. If you're surviving off of $30,000 a year, and there are people in this country that do that, if you're surviving on such low income, just a slight increase in some of the goods that you buy every day is going to hurt badly. Whereas if you're somebody who's making money where you've got excess money to save or invest, you're not going to feel it nearly as much. You're not going to feel it if the toothpaste you buy is suddenly $1 more, or the shampoo that you get every week is $2 more. You're not going to notice that as much, but somebody who's barely eking out a living, it's going to hit them hard. So this next one are just two quick. I just thought this was very elegantly done. This is from Friday. Jeff Bennett, he's one of the co-anchors of the PBS NewsHour. This is just a great example of how to effortlessly, without making too much fanfare, fact-checking President Donald J. Trump. Here we go. I should also add very quickly that they're talking about the jobs report, which was a little lackluster, wasn't terrible, wasn't great.
The U.S. labor market made solid gains again last month, adding 151,000 more jobs just before the biggest federal layoffs began to hit.
Unemployment crept up to 4.1%. More than 7 million Americans are unemployed. Manufacturing had its best report in months, with 10,000 new jobs, which President Trump hailed at the White House.
We've not only stopped that manufacturing collapse, but we've begun to rapidly reverse it and get major gains. We created 10,000 manufacturing jobs in February alone. That hasn't happened in a long time. And these aren't government jobs, which actually we cut. These are private sector manufacturing jobs. So we gained all of those jobs, 10,000 jobs, and we've barely started yet.
The economy actually last added more than 10,000 manufacturing jobs just a few months ago, back in November of 2024.
I just personally, I fell over laughing when I saw that live, because it was subtle. I was like, wait, oh, wow, he just completely fact-checked him. Yay! The other voice you heard there was Amnia Navas. She's the other co-anchor of the PBS NewsHour. I should have introduced her before I played that. But I thought that was just brilliantly put, just because I think we need to see more of that in the media. Just don't let him get away with it. Just don't let him get away with it. And you don't have to turn it into a big thing. Just calmly stop and say, actually, no, what he said is incorrect. And something like the jobs report is so easy because you can look up any past jobs report you want. You can go back any single month. If it's already published, you can look it up for free. Anybody can do it. Anybody listening to this podcast can do it. I've done it. We study these in school. I want to say very briefly, before we move on to the next clip, I went to my grad school yesterday to see this it was a great seminar with the founder of the Texas Tribune, which is a nonprofit news organization dedicated to local Texas news. And he started a foundation which is actually helping hundreds, if not thousands, of local news organizations all over the country, and they're trying this whole new nonprofit model. Now, I have no ambitions of going nonprofit at this point with Decoding Fox News. Media Matters exist. If I went nonprofit, it would be a different type of project because I don't see the point. There's already a very wonderful nonprofit organization that does great work. I don't need to compete with them. It just seems silly. Let them take that money. I'll remain micro-budget, for-profit like I'm doing now. And I just wanted to bring this up because PBS has included a number of segments since I started this project about the nonprofit model for local news and how successful it's been. And we kind of have to rethink news because the idea that we could pay for newspapers for these tiny communities or smaller communities that desperately need news, local news about their local communities through advertisements, just not going to work anymore because the internet has destroyed that model. Even large media companies are struggling. So, and I want to bring this up because it goes back to what I'm doing here at Decoding Fox News. Study after study, and they brought this up today, and this is why I got so excited, has shown that the more local news that is available, community-based news about specific tiny little towns, smaller cities, the less polarization we have. Isn't that beautiful? Because people are more likely to read a local paper than simply be sucked into Fox News, the vortex. And I think that's beautiful. And that's why I wanted to bring that up, even though it's not in the newsletter. I'm just kind of going off the cuff because I got excited going to this seminar today, even though it had nothing to do with my project. I just wanted to learn more about this because I think it's so important. Because, again, people feel like they're more part of a community. They realize that their community is diverse, that they have left, that they have right, that they have different viewpoints, different opinions in their community, and that things like how the police interact with their community, or corruption affects their community, or the schools, or the library, or the local government. All of this is important, and it keeps people from becoming polarized. It keeps people from seeing their neighbors as individuals, as people, as human beings, rather than you're a Democrat, you're bad, you're a Republican, you're bad. So I just wanted to get that out. And I also want to give a quick shout out, although I doubt he listens to this podcast, to my teacher in grad school I got to see today, Greg David. He writes for the City here in New York. Phenomenal teacher. He taught me all about economic indicators, and we have one today coming up, which is the CPI, which is one of the ways that inflation is kind of graded in this country, how they measure inflation. That's very exciting. It's happening, it happened 18 minutes ago. We'll find out what happened. Anyway, moving on. Also, very quick shout out. If you want to study journalism, study business journalism. It will give you the best foundation of anything. Anything. Because it's like the Swiss Army knife. It's very, very useful for Fox News. Incredibly useful because I learned about economics, I learned about business, I learned about economic indicators, all of that. So anyway, moving on, we're going to go to Pete Hegseth. Also gets fact-checked by PBS, and this was glorious. These were two clips, same day, two different networks, hours apart. I stuck them together because I was like, just shut your mouth, Pete Hegseth. Here we go.
Over 20 million people, as the president pointed out last night, poured in across our open border policy.
Now, that is Pete Hegseth repeating a lie that Trump has said multiple times in multiple speeches about the number of undocumented immigrants that crossed our border during the Biden administration. Trump has changed that number multiple times. It's been 15 million, 16 million, 19 million, 20 million, 21 million. I once saw him go 19 million, 20, 21 million in the same speech. He kept changing the number. I don't know why. He just kept changing the number. It bounced around. Now, that would not be a big deal if Pete Hegseth was just a MAGA supporter, a random person off the street. He heard the president said it. He believed it. He's repeating it. But Pete Hegseth is the secretary of the largest military in the world. And that military is working in tandem with border security, border patrol at our southern border. So this is a problem that he doesn't know basic data. Now, this is from the PBS NewsHour. The voices you're going to hear are Amna Navas speaking to PBS White House correspondent Laura Barone Lopez.
Let's just start with some of the biggest claims of the night. What stood out to you in terms of the areas that President Trump focused on?
So this is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the key misleading, exaggerated, or false statements that the president made, starting with the fact that he said 21 million undocumented immigrants entered the United States under Biden. It was actually under 11 million, and many were rapidly expelled.
So that number the 21 million number has been debunked for months by every fact checker on the planet. Multiple times. I included another link by Daniel Dale, the wonderful, amazing fact checker over at CNN. He does a great job. He also debunked it. You can find so many sources on this. It's out of control because it's just simply pulled from thin air. 21 million is pulled from thin air. Trump just made it up, as he's wont to do. So this last clip is just in here for comedy, for comic relief, because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But Jesse Waters, this is from The Five. This is from, what day is this from? on Friday. And Jesse Waters, I can't even believe the producers let him keep talking, that there wasn't something in his ear going, shut up. Jesse Waters goes on a rant about baby boomers. And this is a kind of tired argument about baby boomers that I just can't stand. I personally am very much against labeling and trashing an entire generation. I just don't think it's fair. There's been other pundits, I'm not going to name anybody, who've done this to Gen X. And ironically, with Gen X, which is my generation, we tend to get lumped in with other generations because we're only 15 years long. I don't know who makes up these designations, why Gen X is only 15 years long, but we're only 15 years long. And so for voting data, we're often lumped in with baby boomers. We get like 5 years of baby boomers. And they're like, haha, see, this is all Gen X votes for Trump. And I'm like, no, we don't. Anyway, I've seen people trash my generation. I'm not fond of it. And I'm not going to trash an entire generation. Not millennials, not Gen Z, not baby boomers. I think it's absolutely defeatist and stupid. And what are you trying to accomplish? And you're like, oh, now they'll vote for my candidate because I insulted all of them. So this is the crazy rant. It's full of tired, annoying tropes that aren't true, that are just awful. And just, I can't believe he's saying this. Here we go. Jesse Waters.
The baby boomers. This is what happened. The greatest generation comes back from war. They're all bent out of shape after the Depression, too. And they had lots of kids. And they spoiled them. And they gave them everything. And all of these children just competed for attention. And you get the 60s, and they're all like, me, me, me. Look at me. I'm going to sing. There's no consequences. Free love. And then they got lucky because you hit the Reagan 80s, and then all the way up until now, they rode out the greatest stock market rally in the history of civilization. So now they're at the top of their game, and they're all rich. And they drove this country into a ditch. Look at the border. Look at the debt. And what they've done is they've turned every program into their own personal piggy bank because it's theirs. Everything is theirs. USAID, that's my money. Green New Scam, gimme, gimme, gimme. Even open borders, what did they do? All they did was like buy a place to house the migrants, and they got a $6 billion grant from Joe. This is what's happening. This is the last gasp of the baby boomer generation. They're going to sing, they're going to do a little folk song, but they have not groomed the younger generation. And the younger generation is just as stupid. And this is where the Democratic Party is.
So at the end there, Jesse also insults the younger generation. And I don't know who that is because both myself and Jesse Waters are Gen X. So is he talking about our generation, which is shrunken, partly due to birth control? I mean, it's part of the reason why there aren't as many people my age as there are people who are older, as there are people who are younger. Is he insulting millennials? Is he insulting Gen Z? Who's he insulting? I don't know. But when you insult baby boomers, even though they are no longer the largest generation, they have been replaced by millennials. They are the larger generation. But when you put all baby boomers in the same category and insult them at length like that, acting as if they have all the power and control, which they don't, he just insulted 76.4 million Americans. The baby boomers also lived through economic turmoil and punishing recessions in the late 1970s and early 80s. Inflation and interest rates were quite high as the country grappled with stagflation. Stagflation, and we might be headed for that right now, is when you have high inflation, high interest rates, and high unemployment. It's a nightmare. It's very difficult to pull out of, and it took us a minute to get out of it in the 70s and early 80s. I also want to add this little caveat, which a lot of people forget about the baby boomers. Over 2.2 million men, mostly from the baby boomer generation, were drafted and forced to serve in the Vietnam War, a conflict that cost the lives of 58,200 Americans. Countless others suffered from physical and psychological injuries. Waters is paid millions of dollars to host Jesse Waters Primetime and The Five. His net worth is likely much higher than the average baby boomer. The most stunning part of Waters' insane diatribe was that he was unwittingly insulting his own audience. According to reporting by Politico and the Los Angeles Times, the median age of a Fox News viewer is 68 years old. So, and I know before I get into this, before people start writing angry comments, there's always some debate over where these generations start and stop. But baby boomers are generally perceived to be, right now, as I say this, anywhere from 61 to 79 years old. And again, you can, if you say, no, it's a little younger, it's a little older, fine. Agreed. I'm not going to argue with you over this. But 68 is safely in the baby boomer zone. There's also some people label younger baby boomers, because it's a very large generation, as Generation Jones. So there is like a subgroup within baby boomers called Generation Jones. You can use that or not. It's all good. I'm just putting this all out there so I don't get a bunch of crazy comments about, you got that wrong about Generation Baby Boomer. Okay, great. It's all good. I don't really have strong feelings about it. I just know that 68 years old would definitely be a baby boomer, because Gen X stops at 60. So baby boomers also have the highest, and this is very important if you're trying to be Jesse Waters and promote anybody, baby boomers have the highest voter participation rate of any group in the country. The U.S. Census Bureau found in 2020 that Americans aged 65 to 74 had the highest voter turnout at around 76%. That is staggeringly higher than other groups. So, and that's been the case for generations. As Americans get older, they retire, they have more free time, they're more likely to get involved in politics. When you're younger, you're busy, you've got a job, you've got children to raise, all of these things, and so you've got other things going on. True story, regular listeners of Decoding Fox News. I just did a bit of Judge Jeanine, but I didn't like it. I decided to re-record it. And as I did it, Odin came over again, because he's like, hey, it's like a beacon now. He knows it's near the end of the podcast. So he's on my lap. I'm holding him so he doesn't make any noise as he hits the desk. If you hit this desk, it will make that microphone make noise, and it will have to redo this, cat. So very quickly, here we go. I'm Judge Jeanine, and people say I'm drunk all the time when I'm on Fox News, and I think these people are crazy. I'm not drunk. I'm just Judge Jeanine. I'm a living, breathing, human battle axe, and I could split your skull with my voice alone. So anyway, I gotta go. You're stupid, evil, wicked Democrats who deserve to be punished. Okay, that's it. That's my oh, hey, Odin, he's staring at me. Odin is staring at me. So next up, we've got stories Fox News ignored. Every week, I compare the hours I've watched on Fox to 5 hours of the PBS NewsHour. The following list are stories that PBS covered that Fox News did not, and my source for these are the PBS NewsHour transcripts. So here we go. In Illinois, the man accused of killing 7 people and injuring dozens more at a July 4th parade in 2022 pleaded guilty. 24-year-old Robert Cremo III withdrew his earlier plea of not guilty just minutes before the trial was set to start. He faced 21 counts of first-degree murder. That's actually a huge blessing for everyone involved, that he pled guilty. No trial. He's going to go to prison. It's over. Police in Germany say at least 2 people are dead after a driver rammed a car into a crowd of people in a city of Mannheim, about 400 miles southwest of Berlin. Authorities say a 40-year-old German citizen is in custody. They did not immediately call the ramming an intentional attack, though cars have been used as weapons in Germany several times in recent months. PBS produced a segment about a recent PBS NewsHour NPR Marist poll that showed Trump had a 45% approval rating. Arab leaders from across the Middle East endorsed a plan to rebuild the Gaza Strip. The measure would allow the territory's 2 million Palestinians to remain in Gaza. It's a counter-proposal to Trump's vision, which calls for removing Palestinians from the area and creating a beach destination. Experts warn such a plan would be a war crime under international law. At today's summit in Cairo, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi laid out his $53 billion plan under which Hamas would cede power to an interim independent administration. In Serbia, at least 3 lawmakers were injured after chaos erupted in the country's parliament. Opposition lawmakers threw smoke bombs and flares as the chamber was set to vote on a measure that would increase funding for universities. They say the session was illegal and the parliament must first confirm the resignation of the prime minister and his government. Milos Vujovic stepped down in January after months of anti-corruption demonstrations related to the collapse of a train station canopy that killed 15 people. An investor group led by U.S. firm BlackRock is buying 2 ports at either end of the Panama Canal. Those terminals are currently operated by the Hong Kong-based group C.K. Hutchison. They've been at the center of a dispute between the Trump administration and Panama, as President Trump accuses China of influencing the critical waterway. Last month, Panama's president denied that China had any control over canal operations. The roughly $23 billion deal requires approval from Panama's government. NBA star LeBron James is finding new milestones to hit. James became the first player in NBA history to surpass 50,000 points across regular season and playoff games. That's 6,000 more than his nearest rival, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The 40-year-old James is playing in his 22nd season. He's now tied with Vince Carter for the most played years. That's incredible. Sorry. A judge in Baltimore agreed to reduce the sentence for Anad Syed to time served. That means the 43-year-old will remain free, even though his murder conviction still stands. Syed's case gained worldwide attention through the Serial podcast. He was sentenced in 2000 to life in prison for the murder of his former high school girlfriend. Syed has always maintained his innocence and was released from prison in 2022 after prosecutors found problems with the case. In South Korea, a pair of fighter jets accidentally dropped 8 bombs on a civilian area during a joint military exercise with U.S. forces. The incident took place in the city of Potpun, near the country's heavily armed border with North Korea. Camera footage caught the moment of impact. At least 8 people were injured, 4 of them seriously. South Korea's Air Force has apologized and offered compensation to the victims. A World War II-era bomb was found near tracks at a Paris train station. Police released a photo of the device, which contains more than 400 pounds of explosive material. Workers stumbled upon it overnight while working near tracks north of the station. As crews worked to defuse the bomb, passengers for high-speed and commuter services were stranded for hours. Officials say it's not uncommon to come across vestiges of the war, though this one was bigger than most. Last Friday, a South Carolina man was put to death by firing squad after being convicted of a 2001 double homicide, to which he pled guilty. The execution of 67-year-old Brad Sigmund marks the first time since 2010 that a firing squad has been used in this country, and it comes as the Trump administration works to expand capital punishment, calling for the restoration of federal executions. Former Houston mayor and U.S. Congressman Sylvester Turner has died. Turner spent 27 years in the Texas House of Representatives before serving as Houston's mayor from 2016 to 2024. He was elected this past November to the congressional seat long held by the late Sheila Jackson Lee. Turner took office 2 months ago. He announced that he had undergone treatment for bone cancer and last year said he was cancer-free. Sylvester Turner was 70 years old. Roy Ayers has died. He was a master of the vibraphone, as well as an accomplished keyboardist and vocalist who brought a whole new sound to jazz. His 1976 Everybody Loves the Sunshine has been sampled by artists like Tupac, Dr. Dre, and Mary J. Blige. Known as the godfather of neo-soul, Ayers had 12 albums land in the Billboard charts over his 6-decade career. His family said he passed away from a long illness. Roy Ayers was 84 years old. Robert Clark has died. He was elected Mississippi's first black lawmaker of the 20th century in 1967. A teacher and descendant of enslaved people in a deeply segregated state, Clark was ostracized by his colleagues, forced to sit by himself in the House chamber and at official dinners. But Clark rose to the second highest leadership role in the State House, a position he held until he retired in 2004. His son, Bryant Clark, who took over his father's seat, says Robert Clark died of natural causes. And those are all the stories. There's a lot of them. So next up, by the numbers, every week I compare the top 5 topics on Fox to the top 5 topics on PBS. And we're going to start with Fox. The speech to Congress, that took up 26% of the time. Democrats are terrible, 16%. Trump tariffs, 7%. You'd think that would have been higher. Transgender panic, that's been brought back now that they're, trying to distract from Trump. They're talking about transgender issues for no reason. And Ukraine mineral peace deal was 4%. On PBS, we have speech to Congress, 12%. Artist profile, 10%. Trump tariffs, 9%. Doge, 7%, and Ukraine minerals and peace deal, 6%. Words used on Fox for the week ending March 9th, 2025. Trump, 687. Democrat, 471. Crazy. Tariff, 207. Biden, 159. Border, 139. Ukraine, 115. Economy, 82. China, 49. Elon Musk dropped all the way down, very low this week, 41. Inflation, 31. Al Green, 23. Mass deportations, 20. AOC as in Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, 18. Stock market should have been higher, was only 15. Israel, 13. And Jasmine Crockett, 8. And that's the end of the podcast. If you'd like to see more of my work, you can find me on Twitter, also known as X, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, although not as much. If you'd like to become a paid subscriber, I can always use more paid subscribers because people drop off and new people come in and it's a flow. Please go to my Substack for Decoding Fox News, Patreon for Decoding Fox News. I appreciate all of you. If you can't afford to become a paid subscriber, paid supporter, share the podcast, share the newsletter, share my videos, share whatever. Thank you so much for all your support. I was very proud to tell people at my grad school how well this project is doing. It started with I checked a few months ago, the first official day of Decoding Fox News. I had two subscribers. I now have 23,000. Thank you so much. Odin, and they're not all paid. Don't think if they were all paid, I'd be like, woo! They're not. I'm not anywhere near that. Anyway, Odin and Thor, the podcast mascots, send their love and their cats. Odin is on my lap, and I will see you at the next podcast.
Resolute Square.